I want to talk about Samson's Calling today and our obedience, and then the downward slide. When you read 4 chapters in the book of Judges, it talks about a man named Samson who's called before conception to be a man for God. His mother sees an angel and was making a sacrifice, and she's told that she's going to have a baby, and that she's supposed to take the Nazirite vow even before she conceives. And this is in order that that child would be dedicated to God and that he would not be really lost forever. But Samson, when we read about him, he comes into, the Lord starts working his life, and then he comes into maturity, but he goes his own way. And there's a paper called Samson's Guide to Defeat, and it gives you some things about what you should do, really what not to do, and what you're going to. If you do these things, you're going to really end up in a lot of trouble. You know, it says, we'll try to look for what pleases you. And as soon as you see him in adult life in chapter 14 of Judges, what does he go to say to his parents? He says, "Get me this woman, for she pleases me, and she's from the Philistines." And the Lord has made a rule in the Torah that if one person gets married, it's supposed to marry a fellow Israelite, not some foreigner. And we read in the New Covenant, the Brit Hadashah, it tells us, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers." So there was, a real contrast, and everything that marriage just falls apart because Samson doesn't follow up, and the bride's father gives her to another man. And then the next thing he does, he's just going and just breaks every rule of the Nazirite vow. He encounters a lion on the way, and it's like the lion was like a warning. Now he had the strength from God, and he killed the lion. But then what does he do? He goes back to the carcass of this unclean animal and gets the honey out and shares it with his family. And then the next thing, it says, another thing to do is be a loner. Samson was too much. We read him too much of a loner. When he says he's called as a judge to Israel, and in Judges chapter 15, verse 11, you see 3,000 men. They've come to arrest Samson for the Philistines, and then he just says, makes a sort of a surrender. But what he should have done was really just grabbed those men and drafted them, and had them to fight against the Philistines. But he's just going on the same way. We come at the end of chapter 16. He's just blown it. He's married the unsaved woman, the pagan woman. He's touched the carcass of a lion, which he's not supposed to do, not to have any contact with the dead, first in killing the lion, and going back and grabbing the honey, taking the jawbone of a donkey. God gave him a victory, but he wasn't supposed to touch the jawbone because it was from a dead animal. Then as we get to the end in Judges chapter 16, he's really, on the downward spiral, really at the end. At the beginning of chapter 16, he sees a harlot, and he goes into her, and that, just breaking God's morality. And then we go down, he meets this woman named Delilah, and Delilah, they use her, the Philistines use her to trick him. He's going on telling all kinds of stories, and basically he should have just got it right down to the point and said, giving glory to God for his strength. His strength came from God, but he looked at it in himself. Finally he said, "If you cut my hair, I'll be like other men." And if he would have just said God, then you couldn't touch God. And finally they call him, they shave his head, and he can't fight like he's done the other times. He's blinded, and then what is the job he's done? It's to grind wheat. He was running after the women, and you know the Bible in the New Covenant says, if you read Galatians 6, 7, 8, it says, "Do not be deceived, for God is not mocked." It means you can't, laugh at God and think you're going to get away with it. Samson was just doing this all the way, just mocking the call. And it says that there's two ways to sow. If a man sows to the flesh, and Samson was sowing to the flesh, and just getting what pleases for himself, being a loner, and not really just giving the obedience to the Lord. And it says, if a man sow to the flesh, he shall reap destruction. But if a man sows to the Spirit, he shall the Spirit reap life everlasting. And he's given the job to grind wheat. And what was the thing about grinding wheat? Grinding wheat was women's work. So he ran after all the women, and then a woman took him down. They gouged out his eyes, and he was put in the dungeon to grind wheat, the women's work. So he got what had been coming to him all along, but that God came back to him, and he remembered the Lord. And this is why, I just want to know, what are you going to do with your call? What are you going to do in the face of your praying parents as they have taken their vow to the Lord and they're praying for you? Are you going to mock them? Are you going to thumb your nose at your parents? Are you going to, maybe sometimes too late. Some people, it's too late. But Samson saw that he had been wrong, and he asked God to remember him and gave him one last victory. And you just read at the end, he could have prevented much grief.